Hello everyone, today we're going to talk about the Pseudo Exalted Weapon changes in detail. Previously with the melee incarnate weapons, incarnate evolutions applying to the Pseudo Exalted stats, Pseudos put out insane damage. Now that the stat sticks are a thing of the past, some of you may be worried if Pseudo Exalted are still viable or not. This video is to put that worry to the rest and tell you all the pros and cons of the 5 Pseudo Exalted that's currently available. Let's first talk about Exalted Weapons really quickly because it is all around buffs for Exalted Weapons, allowing us to use Alkaline mods, Exiles, and Arcanes. Notable changes are Excalibur, Baruch, and Titania. Excalibur and Baruch now gain combo counter for the energy waves. Excalibur right now with the Exalted Blade with melee influence set up with a blast and electric via Chromatic Blade is easy room clear. From now on, whenever there's 1999 mission ability kill challenges, I feel like this will be my pick. Aside from damage, Titania's Razor Flies are now invulnerable, which is huge for Titania's survivability. Now for Pseudo Exalted, let's start off with Ashe. It is the only frame that gained massive amount of damage while all the other Pseudo Exalted lost damage. In my build, this output the biggest damage, even more than whipclaw. This is mainly because Ashe's Blade Storm is now affected by base damage mod and the finisher mods. So pre-update, it was not even pushing 4k with melee exposure stacked, but now at 144 ability strength, it can easily push 25k with melee exposure and up to 32k with full stacked melee exposure. And with 12 times combo multiplier, this was hitting 389k with my setup without any other external buffs. For Bladestorm modding, there are some things you need to know. Before we begin further, if you need a refresher on the finisher attacks, you can check out my previous video. Bladestorm is an ability your clones perform finisher attack. The mod screen says it is a finisher, but that is because the base damage is a true damage and it scales off finisher mods as well. But it is not a finisher attack that you perform. Hence, you cannot buff your Bladestorm damage with abilities like Norge or Zada's Whisper, because those buffs only applies to your weapon. Thus, you can only further buff this damage with Roar when it comes to ability buffing. Furthermore, because it's not an actual finisher attack, it does not benefit from finisher attack multiplier or true damage conversion. That's right, right now there is no true damage conversion when it comes to the Ashe's Bladestorm. The base damage portion is true damage because the damage type itself is a true damage. So the moment you start adding elemental mods like Primed Fever Strike, you will notice a massive damage difference between the armored and non-armored targets. With a new patch comes new bugs. Right now, using Ashe changed your regular melee weapon finisher into an 8 times multiplier finisher. Doesn't matter what it is. So even if you're using hammer, the entire finisher animation is changed and it will only deal 8 times multiplier. But I'm sure this will be patched out soon. But the real downside is still how slow it is. The marking mechanic got faster, but still, once the skill is executed, the clones will perform finishers 2 at a time, and it definitely takes a while when you're taking down a group. Overall, Bladestorm is a much better place than before when it comes to damage, but I don't think I'll be using it in the long endurance run because of how slow and clunky it still feels. For the rest of the frame, do note I'm comparing my pre-patch incarnate static builds to post-patch Exalted builds, so the difference may be different than yours, and I'll try to skip any buff ability like Norge to see the comparison at the base level. List a full spec of my pre and post-patch builds and static will be at the end of the video. Pre-update, Pseudo Exalted were largely used with the melee incarnate statistics and hitting for millions of damage when fully buffed. Most of the time, this was used with conjunction with melee exposure because it provided stable damage with 100% uptime, and you did not need to change your build because you're already spamming Pseudo Exalted abilities anyway. However, with the update, you are really decreasing the damage, and it is worth looking into melee influence build because melee influence give you huge AoE capacity as well as much juicier damage when it comes to dealing with AoE groups. Granted, this also means that you have to be mindful of electric damage and the weightings to ensure that your melee influence can proc consistently enough to maintain that buff. So while I can use Prime Fever Strike and any other big elemental damage mods to really push for maximum damage on a melee exposure build, so I have to adjust for the electrical proc weighting when it comes to melee influence build. So how should you balance the status chance and weighting? You need to have the 4 things in mind to find your sweet spot for this: attack speed, number of targets, status chance, and status weighting. Attack speed for Pseudo Exalted are about 1 second per cast. For testing purpose in a simulacrum, I spawn 5 enemies, and when hitting those 5 enemies at a time, my expectation is that the melee influence should proc in about 5 casts. This translates to about 5 seconds of downtime and 18 seconds of uptime, translating into 78% uptime in total. Now back on track. Excalibur slash dash is the biggest loss when it comes to damage. It's a major headache when it comes to checking slash dash in total, so let me explain. Before this update, it was common for players to subsume the Exalted Blade, say for Nourish or Wrathful Advance. However, the update made slash dash to scale off Exalted Blade. So if you have subsumed off your Exalted Blade, you literally cannot scale the damage of slash dash at all. And you know how all other Pseudo Exalted skills build a combo now on Pseudo Exalted Weapon? There is a twist for Excalibur. If Excalibur's Exalted Blade is not active, the slash dash will build a combo for your equipped melee. This is pretty annoying, but is understandable because unless you activate Exalted Blade, your Exalted Blade isn't quote-unquote equipped on you at the time. Then there's an issue stemming from that. While Exalted Blade is inactive, meaning Exalted Blade is not equipped, you cannot benefit from mods like Blood Rush or Weeping Wounds because they scale off combo counter. And since you're not building combo counter on your Exalted Weapon, this is not good. This means if you want to keep playing your slash dash Excalibur, you have to now subsume over Radial Blind. And then you should activate Exalted Blade to get the maximum damage. So now that you have a channeled ability going, making you burn energy and your frame become vulnerable while in operator form. All that and your damage is about 25% of what it used to be. And there is another tick of damage when you use slash dash while Exalted Blade is active. I think this is from the energy wave, but including that is about 100k, translating to 25% of my pre-patch damage. This is a pretty substantial loss if you plan on staying with the melee exposure blade. However, all is not lost. While the base damage itself will be lower to about 77k if you go melee influence build, but with the chromatic blade augment, which gives you so much status chance, you get a very good upkeep on the melee influence. And the AoE capacity is through the roof with this. So while you won't be pushing into millions again with a slash dash, this will still be very viable. Or you could just use Exalted Blade, since you have to activate it anyway. And if you add in some attack speed, since now the waves build combo counter, this also frees you from a slash dash's animation locking. Alas, now with the melee exposure, I can pump out about 178k damage. Pre-patch Atlas, second and third damage chaining landslide gives you increased base damage. However, post-update, and we lost that mechanic and it gained larger hit radius instead. Compared to my previous Ceramic Dagger Incarnate stat stick, the current landslide actually deals more damage on the first hit, but compared to the maximum damage, the third hit, it is about 40% of the past glory. Realistically though, this is not as bad as it seems, because in my previous build, I used crit chance Ceramic Dagger Evolution to give landslide enough crit chance. But now landslide comes with 35 base crit chance and 15 base status chance. So once the punching gets going, with a 90% status chance with Weeping Wounds, this means I can use Corrosive and Viral to further boost my damage without priming. Or you could also go melee influence. Melee influence build will hit lower number than melee exposure, but unlike Excalibur, you don't have access to chromatic blades to juice up your status chance. You cannot use primed fever strike to use viral and electric combination on your landslide because your base status chance is still quite low. Your status chance will be pushing about 90% total, and if more than double the weighting is on viral, you will have very hard time keeping up your melee influence buff. I suggest getting viral by subsuming Norge and increasing electric damage with a shocking touch and voltaic strike to ensure highest weighting. Atlas, if you want to excel a single target with stable damage, go melee exposure and use melee influence build for more general AoE style. Gara previously, although you pumped up more damage by using incarnate melee stat sticks, your Shatter Lash did not give you any combo counter. Thus you had to manually perform melee attack or use Rauta to maintain your combo. This was the main reason I did not bother with the Shattered Lash Gara build, because it felt so clunky. Now, just like Atlas, you get 20 combo counter per cast if it hits any enemy. It is very easy to maintain combo. If you compare damage to damage, my previous melee Dottie Ceramic Dagger Incarnate will get me about 160k as 7x combo, while my melee exposure build right now is hitting at 88k as 7x combo, about 45% damage loss. But I don't feel that it is a DPS loss, because ability is so much more comfortable, and because rather than sitting at 7x combo, because Ceramic Dagger lets me stay there with initial combo, I can push to full 12x combo and dish out 109k damage per cast. With 30% base status chance, Gara's Shatter Lash is a pretty good target for melee influence build. Viral by using primed fever strike still feels like it's too much, and I would opt out to using the 60/60 dual mods for the virals. Khora. My pre-patch Khora was hitting around 926k with the max stacked accumulated whipclaw and melee exposure. Now I'm hitting 440k. Overall, it's 40% of the pre-patch damage. Not too bad considering I have a pretty good Riven for Magistar. Note there is Tenacious Bond equipped on Venari, but Venari is part of Khora, so I think it's fair to keep it on when comparing to different Pseudo Exalted. If you are testing Galvanized Steel versus Sacrificial Steel, most likely your Galvanized Steel would win. In my build with Gladiator Might, Blood Rush, and Galvanized Steel, I can hit 192.5% crit chance. This means I can occasionally see yellow crit, but majority will be orange crit at 440k. If I switch to Sacrificial Steel, although I can guarantee orange crit, DPS loss from the reduced crit damage is massive. Do note the 440k on my core build is with the Molt Augment and 2 purple Tau Shard, giving me 150% melee crit damage. If I remove those, I'll probably be hitting around 200k. So 200k will be the damage to compare to a different Pseudo Exalted. Melee influence build is not bad, but same as Atlas, at base 25% status chance with Weeping Wounds, your status chance is at 135% total. So rather than getting viral damage by weapon modding, use Norge to get viral damage. And you use Shocking Touch and Voltaic Strike to increase the weighting on the electric procs. In summary, Exalted weapons are now significantly better placed than before. It had everything to gain and nothing to lose. Ash's Bladestorm was buffed significantly to the point that it is probably the best damaging skill in the Pseudo Exalted category. However, even though the marking mechanics got faster and even the executions got faster, it is still too slow when dealing with a large pack. Really, 2 at a time when you can mark 20 enemies maximum, that's way too slow. Other than Ash, the rest of the Pseudo Exalted all lost damage. So whether you choose melee exposure or melee influence are up to you, because those two are still very good build for general steel path missions. Excalibur Slash Dash lost massive amount of damage, but it still works very well with melee influence build due to chromatic blades. But since I need to activate Exalted Blade to get Acolyte mods from Arcane, I would recommend switching over to using Exalted Blade build. While Atlas, he can climb up to his past glory by utilizing status effects like Viral and Corrosive, and still gets to enjoy its new buffed AoE radius. Landslide is still very comfortable to use, and if you build it with a melee influence, you literally become the Falcor. And Gara using Shattered Lash gives you combo counter now, so you no longer need to fiddle with the Rauta to maintain combo. Lastly, Khora, even though she lost a lot of damage, she still pushes out respectable damage, and still have a huge self buff with Ensnare when needed. The Pseudo and Exalted Weapon update should open up more choices for Duviri runs and EDA and the newly made ETA runs, because Exalted Weapons are now stronger than before, and Pseudo Exalt no longer are dependent on stat sticks.